Hello everyone and welcome to another Strategoi video. Today I'm really excited to talk about a Lumineth hero who is almost in all of my lists and is the cornerstone for any Vanari focused army. We're of course referring to the Vanari Lord Regent. If you like this guy as much as I do, or if you're curious to learn more about him, please consider liking this video or even subscribing. We've also got a Discord channel now where I'll post updates and discuss content. The link is in the description if you want to join up. That way you won't ever miss out on a new guide. Alright, on to the Lord Regent. For this fantastic tech piece, we're following the regular pattern. We cover his abilities and stats first, then we'll talk about what roles he can fulfill in your army and how to use him well. We end the video with 3 crucial steps and tricks. As for his stats, I mainly want to point out 2 things. First off is his movement of 14 inches. This makes him a very fast and flexible piece on the table, and you'll be able to use that to your advantage. He's also rocking a 3+ save, which is very rare in our book. With things like Aether Quartz and all-out defense, you can easily turn this guy into a tank. Don't expect him to inflict any serious damage though. His attacks have a tendency to fail when you're relying on them. The Lord Regent only has 3 abilities, but they're all excellent. His first one is called Purest Aether Quartz. As long as you have not depleted all of your Aether Quartz reserves on the Lord Regent, he gains 2 benefits. Firstly, your opponent has to subtract 1 from hit rolls when targeting the Regent. This is stackable with Lookout Sir, by the way, so if you want to keep this guy safe from missile damage, just place him within 3 inches of a friendly unit. The Aether Quartz also adds 1 to your casting roll when you're casting his War Scroll spell. Spoiler alert, that spell is the reason why you would bring him, but it has a high casting value, so keeping your Aether Quartz on your Regent for as long as possible is crucial. He's also got a Sun Metal Sword that inflicts mortals on unmodified hits of 6, but contrary to Wardens or Sentinels, you won't be using this effect a whole lot. His magic, on the other hand, is what makes him so incredibly useful when you're running a lot of Vanari units in your army. The Lord Regent knows the greater power of his spell, which does the same thing as a normal power of his spell, but the Regent can target D3 Lumineth units when his spell goes off. That obviously includes himself, but is best used on a big block of Wardens or Sentinels. This spell is extremely good for 2 reasons. First of all, it almost guarantees you'll have Power of Hish up on your damage dealers, like your Wardens or Sentinels. After all, when you'd fail the greater Power of Hish spell, you would still be able to cast a normal Power of Hish as well. So you've got some redundancy there. But it also frees up your Vanari units to cast other spells. The D3 units that benefit from greater Power of Hish can cast the other spell you've given them from the Lore of Hish. So look at this spell as a guarantee, but also as a snowballing effect when it comes to being magically dominant. It's a really strong spell, and your opponents will usually feel forced to unbind it. Alright, as for his roles, the Lord Regent can fulfill 3, and he'll often do all of those at the same time in my games. First off, a Lord Regent is an excellent general for your army. He's tanky and is really useful just hanging in the back. That makes him hard to kill, so it'll be tough for your opponent to score Slay the Warlord. He also synergizes extremely well with a lot of nations and their artifacts and command traits, to the extent where you can create very strong combos. We'll get into those combinations later in the video. Secondly, the Regent is your buff piece when you're running Wardens or Sentinels. Dawn Riders can obviously benefit from this spell as well, but his real strength lies in guaranteeing Power of Hish on your damage dealers, which we discussed earlier in the video. Thanks to his movement of 14 inches, he's also a flexible piece on the board. He can comfortably keep up with almost all of your units, and because he's only a single model, you can easily dash him behind terrain when you need to. Thanks to his 3+ save and his inbuilt -1 to hit, he'll also survive longer than most buff heroes. The last role might come as a surprise if you haven't played a Regent a lot, but he can be a very good anvil. As we just mentioned, he has a 3+ save, which is very easy to improve further with all-out defense or Aether Quartz. The -1 to hit from his purest Aether Quartz ability won't protect you from every threat of course, but it is very good against things like Maw Crushers for example. You can make him even more tanky by giving him the artifact from Zytrek. And that's especially true when you combine him with Teclis. That'll give you a 6+ or a 4+ ward. If you're running him in Syar, you benefit from 2 Aether Quartz reserves, so you'll be able to use your quartz more freely and still keep your -1 to hit. All in all, this guy can do a lot for you, except kill things. So as long as you don't send him into something you really want dead, you'll be good. I would avoid going the flaming weapon route, as he has much more useful spells to cast. Okay, now let's look at some basic tactics. As I mentioned earlier, he synergizes well with almost all nations. Eumetrica sadly doesn't affect him in the slightest though, and in a pure Eumetrica build, he usually doesn't do a whole lot, as you might not even run any Vanari units, so they score an F sadly. Luckily he is good or even fantastic in all other nations. In Syar he benefits from the double quartz even more than other units. But you can also pull off a disgusting combo with their command trait called Goading Arrogance. We'll get into that in a different slide. He's fine in Iliatha as he's a Vanari and thus benefits from doubling command abilities, but having the Simulacra amulet on him is also great fun, especially when he's your general. Your opponent might select him for Slay the Warlord, but with the amulet, he has a 50% chance of resurrecting and not counting as slain, so that's always fun. I personally like him best in Zytrek though. He gets another +1 to cast, and if you were to add Teclis, you'd be casting his Greater Power of Fish with a 3+ modifier. The Gift of Selenar also makes him a lot harder to kill, which has proven to be invaluable in my Teclis lists. With Alumnia, you can pull off a funny trick with their pre-game move, which we will talk about at the end of the video. In Helen he does benefit from their command trait, and their artifact is pretty good if you've made him your general, but neither are game-changing bonuses. When you're setting up your army, deploying your regent correctly is vital. Normally, you'll run him as a Vanari buff piece. In that case, set him up with all your important Vanari units wholly within 18 inches. I advise deploying him horizontally if your lines are also stretching out that way, so he gains some inches for his casting. Lastly, I do try to keep the Shrine Luminor in range for the reroll. Greater Power of Fish has a high casting value, so needing that reroll is not unthinkable. You could also deploy him as a form of flank protection. In all of my games with him, I've rarely done this, but sometimes there's just not enough screens to keep your crucial units safe. If I had to choose between losing my Lord Regent or an entire unit of Sentinels, I choose a Regent every time. Thanks to his big base, he can actually screen quite well. Keep him within 3 inches of a unit to stack Lookout Sword on him, so he doesn't get shut off before he can do his screening. And of course, keep his spell range in mind. He can still do all his other things and screen at the same time. Throughout the game, you'll have to reposition your Regent a lot. With his movement, that's quite easy, but measuring that 18-inch casting bubble before you declare your movement done is very important. Try not to use his Aether Quartz unless it's really make or break. Keeping the Aether Quartz on him for that +1 to cast and -1 to hit is one of the things that make him great. When I'm using him just as a casting piece, I keep him within 12 inches of the shrine, or 24 if you've got a Shrine Guardian of course. That comes with the added benefit of being able to dart around the shrine and use it to block your opponents from getting to your regent. When you need him to tank, you usually want to keep the quartz on him as well, rather than using it for an extra save, especially when you've got a long game ahead of you. When he's soaking up missile damage, make sure he's next to a unit for Lookout Sir. What makes him a really good tank though is when he's not actually taking damage, and that's only possible with the command trait from Sayar. Goading Arrogance forces an enemy hero within 6 inches to target the Lord Regent. And that remains true even when that hero doesn't have the means to get to your Regent. So imagine the scenario on your screen. Your Lord Regent is hiding behind a unit, but still wholly within 6 inches of their base. When your opponent charges the unit in front of your Regent, he'll come within the 6-inch bubble of Goading Arrogance, forcing an enemy hero to target your Regent. As long as you've kept that Regent at least 3 inches away from the front line though, he won't be touched at all. And so, your opponent cannot inflict any damage, because the only thing he's allowed to target is not within range of his weapons. With this move, you can render even the most scary heroes, or even gods, completely useless. Do keep in mind that it requires a lot of practice to position a Regent well enough for that to work, and a skilled opponent will be able to work around the gimmick. Let's run off this guide with some tips and tricks that I personally use quite often. The first one especially is one of my favorite ways to play the Regent. I just finished a tournament where this trick came up all the time. I'll make a separate video on my tournament list in the next week or so, but for now, let's give you a little sneak peek already. Include your Regent in a Zytrek list with Teclis, and give him the artifact called the Gift of Selenar. Thanks to Teclis being in your list, that artifact now gives the Regent a 4+ ward. Combine that with a 3+ save and a -1 to hit from Pure's Aether Quartz, and you'll be looking at a model that is almost impossibly to kill, or at least impossible to reliably kill. There have been several situations where I chose to put my Regent into a precarious situation, and my opponent still simply didn't feel certain enough to choose Slay the Warlords. That 4+ ward is just too good. If your opponent is thinking about killing your Regent, he'll have to invest a ton of resources to do so. The next trick is a move you can only pull off when you're running the Regent in Alumnia. Make a 14-inch pregame move and make sure you're within 18 inches of a priority target. Cast Lament Light on that target when you take the first turn. Move the Regent back to safety and then shoot off the target in your shooting phase. Easy. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to talk about casting order. Greater Power of Hysh is extremely strong, as we've said multiple times now, so casting it at the right time is vital, especially when you're running a lot of Vanari damage dealers. Greater Power of Hysh is such a strong spell that your opponent will always have to consider whether he should try to unbind it or not. That's something that you can use to your advantage, as you can bait out unbinds that way. As a general rule though, cast it before any normal Power of Hysh spells. And with that, we've come to the end of this guide. I hope you enjoyed this video, as I really like the Lord Regent. If you liked it, please leave us a like and a comment, as that will help the channel get noticed by the YouTube algorithm. Also subscribe if you want to stay up to date. Last week I went to a tournament, as I said, and I'll be posting my tournament list including a Lord Regent soon. We'll review the tournament and my matchups with my co-host Ryan, who you might have heard during my Deep King video. Ryan was also playing Teclis, but in a Age of Sigmar list, so that's definitely something intriguing to look forward to. If you want to stay in touch or discuss tactics even further, the best way to do so is in our new Discord. The link is in the description and I look forward to seeing you there. See you then, cheers!